Welcome back to the Meat Speak podcast, powered by the certified Angus beef brand. It feels like it's been forever, right? We have been on hiatus for about 90 days, right? A little more than 2 months since we put a wrap on season 1 of the Meat Speak podcast. But fear not. We are back, and we have decided to bring the reinforcements with us as well. We're going to hold off on that, right? Because our social media folks, right? If you've been following along, have been really trying to keep you on edge, right? It's the cliffhanger. It's Who Shot J.R. with sausages, right? I mean, this is where we're going. I'm Brian Schaff, with me all the way across our cool little, here, I'll do this. Our cool little table that I can raise and lower because we're in the future. Chef Tony Biggs, Chef, how you doing?
I am great. How are you? They renewed our contract. I thought one of us was going to get axed, but guess what? We're back in form, baby.
I was a little nervous, I'm not going to lie, because, let's be real. You cook. You know stuff. You know what I have? I have a mouse in my hand. That's really my only contribution here. I have a mouse in my hand, and
they must have liked what we're doing.
Apparently,
and I think season 2 is going to be even better because we have a surprise for everybody.
Right. Wait until we implement our choreography routine, because we did not spend the last 2 months just twiddling our thumbs. Right. I mean, between COVID and taking 2 months off from the podcast, we had a lot of time on our hands, and I'm just saying, Tony Biggs in tights is a sight to behold.
I'm going to tell you something. I think you gained a few pounds. Did you do a little bit more cooking at home than you usually do?
I did a little bit more eating, I'll tell you that. Nevertheless, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Obviously, if you've been following along on social media, we've expanded the family, right? It's no longer just Tony Biggs and I. We needed to add a third person to really complement Tony's culinary knowledge, my ability to click a mouse and talk, and I want to go ahead and liken this to, if you'll remember, I'm 40. The biggest cliffhanger moments of my life, right? Because I'm a little too young for Who Shot J.R. But remember when M&M's announced the blue M&M, right? Blue M&M was part of the family. My other big cliffhanger was the red balloons being added to Lucky Charms, which, full disclosure, marshmallows are number 2 in that game, right? And I know our mystery co-host who is joining us also is a big believer in the fact that those little crunchy nuggets in the Lucky Charms, yeah, that's where it's at. The marshmallows are there as sort of the backup dancer. So joining us, the new co-host of the Meat Speak podcast, powered by the certified Angus beef brand. It really probably is no surprise to you because she was a frequent contributor in season 1, but now she's official. Diana Clark, meat scientist. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Happy to join the team.
Yes!
Officially.
It's
amazing. Feels great.
Oh, it's so good, right?
Yeah.
Welcome.
And I do completely agree. Anyone out there with the Lucky Charms, the marshmallows are just kind of there. Okay? Yeah. The cereal, that's the best part. I mean, that's why you eat breakfast in the mornings. That's cereal.
It's what makes it. I remember a couple years ago when they announced you could buy bags only of the marshmallows, and people were super excited about it. And I was like, feel a little cheated. Yeah.
So what are they doing with all that other stuff?
Right. They're saving money, right? Where are my crunchy pieces?
Yes.
Come on, Lucky Charms. That said, Diana Clark, meat scientist, really, we've talked about it before, really one of the coolest job titles I think you can possibly get. But tell us about, right? Well, a lot of times we gloss over it. You're a meat scientist. What does that actually mean?
So meat scientists here is essentially, we have groups that come in, break down sides of beef, show them where different cuts come from, kind of give them that education, that farm to fork experience, and let them know the differences within muscles. So if you think about like other meat scientist positions out there, so that's what amazes me, is that in my world, there's a lot of meat scientists because that we all kind of stick together as a family. There's a reciprocal meat conference that happens every year. We all get together, we nerd out over things. But there's some in research and development side. So they're actually the ones that are there creating some of those products, some of those sausages, some of those lunch meats that you think of. Even if you're going into soup, you think about Campbell's Soup, they have meat scientists on staff that are putting those chunks of beef within the meat. They need to know what's going on within that meat. If you think about your dog, your pet food, okay, pet food has a lot of meat in it. So there's a lot of meat scientists that fall into that career. There's also meat scientists that work more with the live animals because they're the ones that kind of know what the quality of that animal is going to be afterwards. So they're looking to see, okay, what can we do from a nutrition standpoint? How can we make this animal optimal, essentially? And then you even have other meat scientists that are working in more directly with animals in academic, and they're really trying to figure out different ways that we can even help human health by using animals as a predictive model. So it's kind of neat to see the array of science that's out there just within the meat science community. But to me, that was one of the coolest parts about graduate school, is any project that we had within the animal science department, ultimately, they came back to the meat scientists and said, hey, can you guys collect a little bit of additional data on this? And we would always do it because you'd want to see how that impacted overall muscle development and quality of the animal.
That's interesting. And, as you talk about it, when I think of meat scientists, and one of the last things that we would have discussed at the final episode of season 1, where we talked about Chef Tony and what it was like for a chef who's really worked in kitchens all around the world, to work side by side with a meat scientist. As you guys know, the beef animal, or really any species of animal, depending on what your focus is, you understand it as almost a roadmap, understanding what the different muscles are, what are they capable of, what do they do in the animal's life, and how does that translate to how they'll perform cooking-wise. But one of the things that always jumps out at me is, every once in a while, it seems like every decade, you hear about these new cuts, right? These new steaks that you've got to try. Well, it's not like the animals are all of a sudden growing new steaks.
No.
You guys are finding these by cutting them differently, by isolating muscles. Can you talk about that? And can you talk about some of those quote unquote new steaks that people probably haven't heard of that maybe they will?
Yeah, and that's actually, to me, another really neat part about the beef industry. So there's NCBA, National Cattlemen's Beef Association. They, about 15 years ago, they had this beef innovations group. And their goal was to actually start to look at specific muscles within the carcass and be able to utilize those more for steaks. And so University of Nebraska actually did this really, really neat study. And if you go on to bovine myology, just type that into Google. It's a really cool website that you could spend a lot of time on. But they dissected the animal, and they have images of every single muscle that's within there. And they looked at its pH, they looked at its color, they looked at its water, moisture, fat, and ash content, protein content. Then they also looked at the tenderness scores for all of these. So it was really diving into the animal and seeing what muscles we could utilize more appropriately. And so, for instance, the flat iron. I mean, that was being ground or left in a 7-bone roast for a very, very long time as a top blade. And we realized if we just take a knife and we separate those two seams, now we have these 2 flat irons, and it's the second most tender cut in the animal. And so there's cuts like that really just a little bit extra knife work. And I don't want to say that the United States, like we're the ones that have thought about this, and because there's other countries that have already been fabricating animals this way and dissecting it a little bit further. But I think it's just finally caught on here, and you're seeing that starting to grow. And so now we're taking more of these underutilized cuts, like the Merlot steak, one of my near and dear friends. And the reason why I like it so much is because it's one of those cuts that would just get thrown into grinds and discarded and forgotten about, when I think there's so much more value within that cut. If you just take your knife and seam out that steak, it makes it pretty easy.
Yeah, it eats really well. Diana, what's it like? We're just going to turn our discussion with Tony, and I implore all of y'all to go back and check out season 1, but specifically the kind of the wrap-up episode, the last one. We asked Tony kind of what it's like to work with a meat scientist. Turned on its head, what is it like for a meat scientist, right? You're a kid from Chicago who didn't really grow up on a farm. But you went to the University of Illinois, you got your master's in meat science. You understand the animal from a musculature standpoint, but what is it like for you to basically work shoulder to shoulder, day by day, with chefs, right?
The culinary side of things is amazing to me because I feel like that is the biggest disconnect between academia and meat science and the culinary world. And really, the chefs are the ones that are using the product the best, but more than anyone else. They're the ones that are taking those muscles, the tougher cuts of meat. You think from the round or from the chuck, those are muscles that are involved in locomotion. So they need more time, more energy to break them down and make them taste good. And they can do that. They can make any cut be amazing, regardless of what it is. So we look at adding value to the carcass by breaking down and getting to these individual muscles. But really, if it doesn't translate over to that culinary world, it's not going to go anywhere. So the chefs are really driving everything. And I love seeing their ideas because they, especially Tony Biggs, out of this world, out of the box. And a lot of the times as the scientist, I'm like, we cannot do that. That is immediately what I think in my head. But no, he just keeps pushing and knows, no, this is possible. Let's just try it. So coming up with these new ideas to utilize those muscles in ways that we haven't before, and then we could get more utilization out of the carcass. I think that is the coolest part about it. And I've learned so much. I feel like I've been able to travel the world by just eating Tony's cuisine. Not going to lie. So it's pretty awesome.
And I just like to eat Tony's cuisine.
But at the same time, Diana, I encourage. I mean, I've been in this industry for 40 years, and the last time I saw, got my hands on a carcass was at Culinary Institute of America in 1984, and then buying boxed beef and just learning how to cook beef. But when I started here at Certified Angus Beef 6 years ago, and was paired up with a food scientist like yourself, and it's been an amazing journey. And first, I want to say, hey, congratulations for joining us on this show. You're a wealth of knowledge, and we love you dearly. And I've learned, so much. And it's just kind of like if you're an operation guy like myself, Diana is going to cut she's going to fabricate in our meat lab, throw them over to me and our team, and we're just going to cook them up for our guests. And it's like, wow, are you kidding me? I mean, can you just imagine? Yesterday I saw Diana Clark break down a whole carcass. She laid them all out, all the cuts on a beautiful table, took this photo. It's Instagrammable. It's going viral. It was just an amazing scene. And one last thing about her. She showed me the scapula bone. Now, who in their right mind would use a scapula bone? That comes from the chuck. It's the shoulder blade. But you know what, chefs? It makes a great serving vehicle. So one day, she's got expertise in animal science and all this. I'm walking into one of our local grocery stores. I look down, and there's this dog bone staring me in the face. It was the beef scapula. Could you believe it? I took a photo. I sent it to Diana. I said, "Can you believe this? You have set a trend. Somebody stole your idea. The beef scapula is now a dog bone."
That is so awesome. But that's what I mean. That's crazy to me. So bones itself, usually, those just get thrown into rendering. But look at this. Tony takes it and uses it as a serving plate. Like that blows my mind. And it was awesome. The jaw drops as that hits the table.
Yeah. They also come in handy, if you're ever in a canoe and you've lost your oar.
Or
pull out a scapula bone.
Paddle tennis.
Yeah, ping
and
pong.
God forbid you paddle your kids. These days right now, right?
Hey, Ida Marie knows what's coming.
So Diana, tell us a little bit more about yourself, right? What makes a kid from Chicago, mean streets of Chicago, right?
Yeah.
End up who was never really into agriculture or anything like that? What makes you decide I want to go to the University of Illinois and play with cattle?
So it's kind of crazy. I wanted to go into animal science. I knew I liked working with animals, but really for vet medicine. That was kind of my goal, to be a vet when I started at University of Illinois. And I was there for a couple of months. And one day everyone has to take Animal Science 100. So it's 3 days of lecture, 2 days of lab. And so I was sitting after lab, and I was talking to a professor, and I ended up staying about 2 to 3 hours after lab just talking to him about animal science in general and the things that he was working on in his department. And he looked at me and said, "So what do you want to do when you graduate?" And I said, "Oh, I want to go to vet school." He said, "Are you sure?" I was like, oh, I don't know, I guess. I thought I was fairly sure, but maybe not. And so he encouraged me to go and start looking at departments within animal science and seeing if I enjoyed anything. He said, you have a very research mind. He said, I think you might be benefit more if you were in one of those programs. And so I started looking, and then I also needed some money to pay for school. So I started working at the meat lab at University of Illinois, and I was jaw dropped by the experience that I had there. So my first day ever working there, I was told to get there at 7 a.m. and it was a Tuesday, and I was just told to bring a change of clothes, and that's all I really knew. And lo and behold, the University of Illinois, 7 a.m. Tuesday is harvest day at Illinois. So that was the city kid walking into her first ever seeing this whole experience, and it was kind of just like a moment of, okay, what is going on here, and taking it all in. But then I just started asking questions like, why is this happening? What's going on? And I mean, it's silence. Like, everyone thinks that it's going to be this gruesome, horrible. There is no noise. It's quiet. It's clean. This is food that we're talking about here, so it has to be clean. But just knowing that whole production was so cool to connect those dots. And I think that just kind of sparked a fire to stay in meat science.
Our old pal, Dr. Phil Bass, right, former meat scientist here at Certified Angus Beef and now a professor at the University of Idaho, used to say, I went into meat science instead of being a veterinarian because it's much easier to make sure the animals stay dead.
Yes. You're way more successful.
100% success rate so far. So after University of Illinois, you kind of worked around. You'd mentioned that you'd worked at Sara Lee. You came to us from a veal plant, though.
Yeah. So University of Illinois was there. I got my master's there. During that time, I should say, I actually worked at Sara Lee for 2 summers as an internship and temporary technician. So working on the research development, specifically Hillshire Farms. I looked at lunch meat, ham, and turkey. We're looking at different formulations. This is when the lower sodium kick was very high in the United States. So we're looking at reformulating a lot of things there. I also met my husband, Dr. Daniel Clark, who is a meat scientist as well. So we do talk a lot about meat, and we also talk a lot about Certified Angus Beef because he now works at Certified Angus Beef. I converted him over to the great side, I should say. He used to be in poultry, so there's that. Just throwing that out there. Let everyone laugh for a second. But we did move out to Ohio because he got a job at OARDC, which is a research center branch of the Ohio State University. So he was working there, and I moved to Ohio and needed a job. I applied everywhere. I even applied to be a meat cutter at the local grocery store, and I did not get accepted to that position. Wasn't even interviewed. Not bitter at all. Don't worry about it. But I did work at a veal plant in the meantime in Creston, Ohio, and as quality assurance. And that, to me, was my eye-opener of, okay, this is what we learn of how to do in school, and it needs to be done this way, and then this is real life. So it kind of made me understand what actually happens in the industry and how we can cope with that. And then there was an opening at Certified Angus Beef, and I knew it was a great company to work for and had some experience with a lot of people, Dr. Phil Bass being one of them in the past. And so I reached out and said, hey, do you think there's a spot for me here? And they said apply, and yep. So, lo and behold.
And the rest is history.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah.
And you heard this podcast was going to be launching soon, so you
want
to get in early.
I wanted to make sure I was there for that.
But I noticed something working with Daniel. You're picking up 300-pound sides of beef and you're cutting them. I never see him do this. I always see him saying, "Hey, can you pick this up, honey? Can you lift this for me? I mean, come on, what is going on here?"
I mean, it's the Italian me. I got the muscles. They might as well use them, right? I just
On that note, one of the things that we never did in the first season, and we talked a little bit about background, but we never specifically dove into the collective mind of the folks in this room. So I've got some prepared questions that are not just tell me about your resume, right? These are going to, they're going to expose you at your soul, at your core, right? So if you guys are prepared, right, I want to go ahead and I want to ask you some very pointed questions. To all three of us, right? I'm cheating because I've had time to prepare. But if you guys are ready, Diana, we'll start with you. If you were a cut of meat, a cut of beef, which would you be and why?
Okay, so if I were a cut of beef, I think, and see, now I'm leaning towards the Merlot just because it's that unique individual that people want to know more about. It's not loved by everyone, but it just does great where it's at. And I think it's going to be a future shining star. Not that I'm going to be a future shining star at all, but it's in the heel. It's the low end cut. And I feel like that's where I should be at with these cuts of meat. I like it. You can braise it. You can cook it as a steak. That's what I'm going to go with.
Amen. But, the Merlot's not that tough, right?
No.
Right? You're throwing around whole sides of beef here.
It's fairly, I know.
Right? Right? You might want to go with something that, what's the PR spin? A little less tender.
There's no toughness.
That's right. Right, because you are tough. I have seen you Greco-Roman wrestle. Not really. Tony Biggs, how about yourself?
Well, I have a cut close to my heart because, this cut, I'm able, every night after someone has this cut, I am able to go home with this person or persons. I'm the only one. This is the only cut that really kind of gets the consistency of I want to jump into a doggy bag and I'm going to take you home. And so what cut is that? That is from the short loin. And it's the porterhouse and T-bone. Yeah. And guess what? That bone always, for some reason, hey, can you pack this bone up for me in a doggy bag? Because I'm going to go home and give this to Little Fido or Big Z. And so I get to go home with everybody.
That's a good call. I like that one.
Very
nice. A lot
of
versatility within that cut, too.
I'm going to go with the brisket point, right? We're not just going to say brisket. I'm going to say the brisket point, or, thanks to my meat science friends, the pectoralis superficialis, because one, I'm fatty. Two, I feel like I come out of the chute always pretty strong. Like, man, this is great. But there's so much of me that after a while, you just kind of get sick of me.
I disagree with that statement completely.
All good and flashy at first, but then you're like, man, I'm kind of done with this. So I think that's me to a T, right? So that's why we have to keep these interviews fairly short, because y'all will be real sick of me around the 60-minute mark here. So
no way.
Not true.
No way.
No one will turn down a brisket point.
Oh, little buffalo sauce and blue cheese, and we still love you.
Little burn ends.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You just need the right dipping sauce.
That's right.
Brian.
You need
That's
dipping sauce. Yeah.
True story. True story. How about here's another question. You have one dish that you can eat every day for the rest of your life. Not just that you can, but that you have to eat every day for at least one meal for the rest of your life. What is it?
You go first.
Does it have to be beef?
No.
I tell you, I love pasta. This is my Achilles heel, as you can see by the pounds I'm gaining, right? But I love pasta pomodoro, and you know all about it, Diana. You are Italian, and you love meatballs. We've had meatball discussions. I just love a good spaghetti and meatballs, and so or pasta pomodoro or linguine and white clam sauce. I like pasta. Yeah. I like pasta. So pasta, I could eat every day.
But I think you're covered because you said meatballs, right?
Meatballs.
But give me your, and not your, I'm on the Meat Speak podcast powered by Certified Angus Beef answer. What's your favorite kind of meatball? Because you hear about veal blends, you hear about pork, you hear about beef, lamb.
And it was amazing because yesterday I was browsing through a CIA online magazine, and every week they have different stories about different recipes from different chefs around the world. And I went home one day, and my wife goes, and she's Filipino, and she's not an expert in meatball making, and she goes, I made meatballs for dinner. And I started laughing, and I should never have laughed because that is like the car. This woman went to all this trouble to make meatballs for me, to try to make meatballs for me, and I laughed, and I shouldn't have done it. And I apologize on the air here if you're listening, but she made these meatballs, and I sat down for dinner, and I cut into it, and I couldn't believe my palate. I was like, "You made these meatballs? What did you put in them?" And so she explains to me that we juice every day, right?
Uh-huh.
So we juice apples, we juice celery, we juice different fruits, and she used the pulp from the juicer to make the meatball.
That's a great
With
idea.
your garlic and your breadcrumbs, your eggs. And it was magical. The fruits just blended in. They melted into the sauce. The meatball was so moist.
Oh,
and
that's
you
a
could taste
great
little bits
idea.
of carrot that were just in there. It was amazing. And I gave her, I said, bravo, bravo, a standing ovation. I bit my tongue. She makes the meatballs from now.
I love that.
Yeah.
That sounds
So.
awesome. I'd say, so mine has to be, I'm fairly simple. So, I would probably a strip steak, salt and pepper, roasted tomatoes from the garden, fresh tomatoes, okay, they have to be. And then probably maybe green beans. I'm a vegetable beef type person. That it's got to be a grilled steak. Got to be grilled. You have to have those grill marks on there. And I think I'd be set. I really do. Yeah.
And you went with the strip steak, huh?
I did.
Interesting.
Because sometimes you need a bit more of that fattiness in your life, and that strips can carry that.
I feel like the strip is like sort of your like universal, like it's not quite as tender as a tenderloin, but it's pretty tender.
It's pretty tender.
And it's not quite as fatty as a ribeye, but it's got good. It's sort of
That's
your
my
nice
favorite.
like happy
It's a
medium
balance.
between yeah.
So
That's
if
my
I'm going
favorite.
to eat it every day,
That's my
it's
favorite.
perfect.
Life is about balance, right?
Uh-huh.
That's my favorite.
Right on. I'm a smash burger guy all day long,
Oh.
and I mean like I want it. Gavin Pinto, our
He's excellent
our
at this.
test kitchen manager chef here at Certified Angus Beef actually showed me this method of I used to just like smash like push it down as hard as you can on a hot griddle. It was great, but he showed me if you smash and then kind of smear it,
Bread.
it gets so thin. Like it gets even thinner and crispier than just a smashed patty. Where if you smear it, you can pick it up and it almost looks like cheesecloth. You can see holes in it. So you do that, you put a couple of them on. I don't get fancy with cheeses. I want American cheese. I want a mayo, pickle, and a little MSG mixed in with my mayo as well on a toasted bun all day long. I'll eat that 3 meals a day for the rest of my life. All day long. Diana and Tony, you guys both have long tenures at Certified Angus Beef. You've worked side by side. You've had a lot of folks come into the Culinary Center here on the north side of Worcester, Ohio. I always tell people, we tend to do things fairly quietly, right? If people only knew here in Worcester, if people had any idea who is actually coming to Worcester, Ohio, their minds would be blown, because we're talking about some of the greatest chefs in the world. We're talking about some of the greatest professional athletes and
Yes.
media personalities who are now playing in food, who they come to Worcester, they stay at the little Hampton Inn right across the street. And they're here in Worcester, Ohio, a town of 30,000 people. It's fairly small in rural Ohio. And the folks in the community just don't know, because we do things very quietly. What has been your favorite moment that you've got to experience in your career here over at the Culinary Center?
So I'll say my favorite moment was just not this summer, but the summer before. We had our international group in. There was actually 13 different countries represented. And while they were in, we had a rib that was dry aging, and it reached its year-old birthday. Okay, we ended up taking that rib to 400 and something days. But I thought, for its year-old birthday, we need to do something special. So I made it a cake. It was a red and white marbled cake with white frosting, put a candle in it, and we sang it happy birthday. But not only did we sing it happy birthday in American and English, I should say, but we also sang it happy birthday in every single one of their languages.
That was fun.
It was one of the neatest things I have ever been a part of.
That was fun.
There was enough countries in there to start a world war easily with the political views and religious views of everyone, but we all came together over beef. And I think that is the beauty of this building, is we have direct competitors that are walking into this building together, and they have a friendship here. This is a common ground and a place for people to learn. And so just getting people together and exchanging ideas from over the world, it's phenomenal. So I think that was my ultimate. It's going to be a very hard one to top.
Wow, I have so many, but other than, cooking a side of beef in the backyard of certified Angus beef, starting at 4:00 in the afternoon and serving it to our great staff the next day at 11:00, p.m. for lunch, and it was tacos. I would say, as Brian mentioned, we have folks come in from celebrities, and I think probably setting up a chef table for 8 folks in our kitchen for a chef's table with the Hall of Fame kicker with Morton Anderson, who got the Atlanta Falcons, kicked them into the Super Bowl against Denver, and our other guest was the legend Evander Holyfield.
That's cool.
In my kitchen for a chef's table, 3-hour meal, 5 courses. I would have to say that's paramount, and that is just amazing. We didn't talk about ears at all or anything like that. We didn't bring up Mike Tyson or things like that, but just to have those 2 guys in the audience, and they were just so receptive, fun, and we have built relationships now over the years with them, and so we actually went to Super Bowl with both of them. So that was pretty great in my mind.
That's fantastic. Cool. One of my favorite memory from that was, it was actually down here, right just outside of our sound studio, and we're sitting in this little room here with Evander, and Mark, our photographer, actually said, "All right." Like, it was the question everybody had been dying to ask, but nobody asked. And finally, Mark said, "All right, I got to ask you about the ear."
Did he seriously ask?
Yeah, and Evander, being cool as can be, says, "Let me tell you about the ear." He says, "That fight lasted, I think it was like 2 minutes and so many seconds." He said, "And when that was over, I went to the hospital and I got 15 stitches in my ear. And then I got a check for $35 million. My ear's doing just fine."
That is hilarious.
It was amazing, and it was just Evander in his element, and Lord knows how many times he gets. And that really is the shame of that. You're talking about one of, if not the greatest boxer in American history.
He is such a cool
the first question
backstory.
people ask is about how he got his ear bitten off.
Yeah.
Like, come on, man, dude is an Olympic medalist, for crying out loud.
He's got if you guys you got to listen to his story. He's got such a neat story. It's really cool.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Very humble man.
I'm glad you guys went where you did with that question, because my favorite moment here is, here at the in Worcester, we're able to bring people together, and for me, it's like we work for a beef company. We eat a lot of steak, we eat a lot of burgers, but at the end of the day, like, people is what it's all about. It's the people, it's their stories, it's where they're from, it's how they got to be where they're at, it's how they went from Chicago to to farms to working for certified Angus beef, or how they went from cooking for Imelda Marcos or cooking for the King and Queen of Jordan here in Worcester, Ohio, like you have, Chef. To me, it's always been about the people, and I can remember there was one night in particular where we had a large chef gathering, and it was great, and it was probably 9:00 at night, and all the chefs, great chef friends of ours from all across the country, like Cindy Hudson down in Miami, and Mike Fischetti, and Justin Diglio from Joe's in Chicago, and Tremonto, and our pals from up in Cleveland, Brett Sawyer and Jeremy Umansky, and just so many folks, and all we did was, we literally sat around a fire pit in our parking lot until midnight, until 1 a.m, and just told stories and had a couple drinks. And it was just glorious. And so for me, as much as it's amazing to talk about meat science and steaks and different cuts and how things break down, the best thing that we get to do, honestly, probably the best thing that anybody in their livelihoods, whether they're working for us or working for insurance companies or whatever, is always going to be about. It's about the people, right? It's not about the product. It's not about the thing. It's not about the commutes to work. It's about the people that you get to interact with. And this is I'll put this as my master contribution. This is the great tie-in. And speaking of people, Diana Clark, we are so proud and so happy that you have decided to join us as our official co-host here on the Meat Speak podcast.
I'm so excited to actually be a part of it now. It's pretty
Right.
cool.
That means, right behind you is a tiny cardboard cutout of Chef Tony and I. That means you're going to get on a
Where do you want
cardboard
to
cutout.
be? You want
I,
to be in the
I
middle?
kind of want
Do you wanna-
I want my one hand on either shoulder and like my head's poking up
Okay,
behind
that's
you
done.
guys.
That's done.
Right, we can
Done.
make we can make this
We can make it
happen. So that said, don't be surprised. You will see some more promotional material around the podcast. Give it a like when you see it on social media. Give it more likes, right? Because it's got Diana Clark in it. It's not just Chef Tony and I anymore. So that said, Diana Clark, Chef Tony Biggs, thank you guys for joining us here in the inner sanctum here at the world headquarters of Premium Beef Certified Angus Beef on the north side of Worcester, Ohio. That's about 40 minutes south of Cleveland. But if this is your first time tuning in to the Meat Speak podcast, know that you can find us across all of your major podcasting platforms, Google, Apple, Spotify, or simply by visiting certifiedangusbeef.com/podcast. Until next time, Chef Tony Biggs, meat scientist Diana Clark, thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you.
See ya.